Thank you, dear director, dear professors, ladies and gentlemen, but certainly dear students. It's for me the 5th time that I'm here in this beautiful city, and the first time, of course, in this higher school of business. And I hope after a short introduction that you have a lot of questions, and perhaps I cannot answer all the questions, but you can launch every question that you have about Europe, about Brexit, about populism, you name it, I shall try to answer it. But before doing that, like the director said, I'm for the moment Deputy Prime Minister in Belgium, responsible for employment, economy, consumers affairs. I studied also in a business school in Belgium, Flanders, the Vlerik Business School. After I studied law and philosophy, and I hope that after the studies here you have a successful career, perhaps in Europe or perhaps in Belgium, Flanders. You're very welcome, of course, after your studies. Dear students, you know that the relationship between Belgium and Russia is a relationship over several decades, several centuries. You know that in the century that passed us, that Belgium has a very important industry, and there are a lot of Belgian companies that at that time invested here in Russia, invested in railways, invested in a lot of electricity, for example. We have a long history together. And still there are very important companies active here in St. Petersburg and in Russia all over the country. And that's also the reason why I'm here, because tomorrow there is St. Petersburg Economic Forum where I shall talk about some things, and when you have some questions and some information, I can bring that tomorrow also in the debate, perhaps. Now, the relationship between Russia and Belgium is a very important one. But I must say, we have had also some difficulties. When you look to the past, it was not always a relationship without problems. That's not new, but I must say that now we have some different views, and you know that there are, for the moment, sanctions between Europe and Russia, sanctions between the United States and Russia. And the reason, therefore, is that, of course, the Minsk agreements that we think and we hope that this issue, Ukraine and a lot of other elements, that we can solve that kind of problems around the table. That's my first message here in St. Petersburg, that we have some difficulties, but always we are open for dialogue, because the only solution for problems, for discussions, is around the table. And that's my first very important statement, that we must invest more than today in dialogue. Secondly, I am a big believer of the European Union and the project of the European Union. For the moment, we are with 28, and perhaps in October or November, we are with 27. You know that UK decided to leave the European Union. I must say, frankly, that is not the most intelligent thing to do for the moment. But there is a democracy in UK. There was a referendum, and the people voted, and they voted to leave the European Union. What was the reason to leave the European Union? There were two reasons at that time. The first reason was we must take control back. We must have all the decisions in our hands, and not in Brussels with a lot of bureaucrats and ministers that decided some stupid regulations. We must, that was the feeling in the United Kingdom, we must take control back. The second reason was when we leave the European Union, then we shall have a lot of money. A lot of money to invest in social affairs, in social welfare, and so on. And, dear citizens of the UK, when we leave the European Union, we can make your life better. Now we are 2 years further. And what is the discussion now in the United Kingdom? Discussion now in the United Kingdom is what will be the impact on jobs. Is it true that 10,000 jobs will disappear? What will be the position of very important companies active in Europe and also in UK, that these companies leave the United Kingdom to go to other countries in the European Union, like, for example, Belgium? Second, it is first very concerned, what will be the future? The second element is what will be our life standard? Because already there is a lack of medicines, there are a lot of problems with the logistic chain and so on. And now we have in the United Kingdom another discussion, a discussion, about democracy, a discussion about the political system. And you know that they have now time until the end of October to decide. Then there must be a decision that said very clearly we shall leave the European Union and we shall try to have a new relationship with the European Union. Now, why is that so important? It's important, first of all, for the project of the European Union, because the reaction of the 27 was not, okay, now we have a big problem. Of course we have a big problem, but the cohesion between the 27 members left is now stronger than ever before. Now the belief in the European Union is stronger than before. And that's a very important new evolution. And secondly, of course, the economic impact will be different from country to country. For example, Belgium, the impact will be very important because we have a lot of export to the United Kingdom. We have a port, Zeebrugge, with a port that for 80% of all the traffic is going to the United Kingdom and back. There are some companies that export to the United Kingdom for more than 40%. The impact will be very important for the economy in Belgium. And that's the reason why we are pleading for not a hard Brexit, but a soft Brexit. That means that there will be also in the future a very clear framework to make trade and economic ties possible. For us, the European Union is a very important one, and when the European Union is now more in charge, and certainly after, we have had elections in May, 26th of May, we have elections in Belgium for the European level, for the federal level, and for the regional level, and certainly also for the European level. And there was a big concern about these elections. That's my other point that I shall try to make. That is the race of populists and populist parties. There is also in Europe and Belgium a lot of fear. People are afraid. They don't understand the new evolutions about, for example, globalization, digitalization, the climate change, the situation of multinational companies. A lot of people don't understand what is going on in the world and what is going on in Europe. And when you are afraid, when you have a lot of concerns, then it's easier for parties to say, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, the answers are very simple. The answers are not so complex. You must not be afraid. We give you the answer. And the answer is very simple. And a lot of people, unfortunately, believe this kind of parties, of people that said the answers are very simple. And to be frankly, there are no simple answers for the complex political problems that we have all over the world. In Europe, there is a big discussion about migration. We have a lot of immigrants coming to Italy, to Greece, trying to live in Europe. Because the life standard in Europe is very high, I must say. Impressive high. Social system is very, very good. And a lot of people from Africa and all over the world are trying to come to Europe. And the simple answer is the answer that also President Trump gives in the United States. We shall build a wall. We shall not accept refugees from war. We don't accept any more immigrants in Europe. That's simple. But, dear students, that is not possible. When people coming from a war zone ask help from Europe, you cannot say, we have a wall, you cannot enter Europe. That's too simple. We have also international treaties where we are very clear. We have, for Europe, values we must defend. A human people, man or woman, is important to have the protection when their lives are in danger. And that's the reason why, for example, migration discussion is so difficult to say it is more complex. We must, of course, defend your pension. We must defend your position. We must defend that you find a job. But we must also accept that we give the support for people that need us and need our support. This fear, this political environment where populist parties are very popular in Europe. We must try to organize dialogues like this one, to say what the problem is, not to say there is no problem. There are some problems. To say, okay, that's the problem. I'm listening. What do you think about it? And to have a dialogue, to give people the information to decide which party can solve the problems. Now, for Europe, we shall now have a new Commission, a new European Parliament, and I hope that we can bring, and that's very important, the message to the people that Europe is there for the Europeans. And also, that's my other point, that Europe is not only there for the Europeans, but Europe is also a world player. Europe is a very important force. very important when you look to the values that we have, but also to dialogue with other very important countries, like Russia. Russia is nearby. We have discussions with the Chinese, and the President Xi Jinping is here. He arrived this morning. We have also discussions with China, with the United States, of course. But we have the same history, you know. When you look to the history of Russia, Russia is Europe. And therefore, we must invest more in dialogue, in coming here, and you coming to us to speak and to find solutions. And I hope that today and tomorrow we give the good example in that philosophy. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, I can talk hours and hours, but I think it's very important to give you the opportunity to ask me some questions about what I've said or what I've not said, because it's also interesting for me, and not only to have a lecture and you listen or not listen. Okay, therefore the floor is open, and I hope that you have a lot of questions. The temperature is very high. The weather in Belgium, it's raining for the moment. I'm lucky to be here. But I have a few questions, please.
So you've said about Brexit that people 2 years ago decided to leave the EU and float into the Atlantic. And my question is Brexit at this point even possible? Because I heard that people started to change their decisions, and some studies show that about 30% of people now want Brexit to happen. And so what's going on?
Okay, the question is the Brexit finally decided or not? Is it possible to have a new referendum, or that's your question? Huh?
Is it even possible, at all?
Yeah.
So, and also I've heard that there's some kind of deal that people want, or no deal. Like, what even is a deal?
Okay. For the moment, the problem is not. Excuse me. That is okay. The problem is not in Brussels, not in Europe, but the discussions are now going on in London. It's UK that is now in a very bad shape. Also, when you look to the political discussions and what the situation is for the moment. There is no agreement in London, in UK, about what shall we do now. The Prime Minister is now not in charge anymore. There is a discussion what will be we will be the next Prime Minister. We will be Johnson or someone else. First of all, there is a political instability in London. Secondly, there are two phases in the debate. You have Article 50 that gives the opportunity to, in this case, UK, to leave the European Union. That's for the first time that they use Article 50. This, you have a treaty, an agreement about I shall leave the European Union. There is a negotiation, and there is a draft where the 27 accepted that when you leave the European Union, that are the consequences. And this document cannot be changed. That's the position of the European Union. When there is an agreement about that, then we can go to the next step, and that is to negotiate a free trade agreement. When there is no agreement, first phase, then you have the situation of a WTO situation. That means that you have tariffs, that you have a lot of naughty things that have a very important impact on our economy. First of all, I hope it will be not a hard Brexit, and a hard Brexit means in a scenario of a WTO with tariffs and so on. That will be very, very negative for the trade between Europe and UK. This I plead for a soft Brexit. That means that UK accept the first agreement to leave the European Union, a divorce agreement, and that there will be, in the second phase, a free trade agreement that is acceptable for us and internal market and so on, that gives the opportunity to companies to do business like they do for the moment, more or less. That's the situation.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I would like to come back on the sanctions. So we all know that Russia reacted to the European sanctions with counter-sanctions. I would like to know how Belgium and the European Union were affected. And also, I would like to know, according to you, if the fact that Russia is developing its agriculture, if it can be a threat for the European agriculture, and also if the counter-sanctions end, if like the European Union could continue its exports to Russia, agricultural exports, I mean.
Okay, very interesting question. In global, we have a very delicate situation when you look to world trade situation. You have the situation between United States and China, trade war between these two very important economic players. You have the discussion about the nuclear agreement with Iraq and Iran. And you have, of course, third very important international treaty is the Treaty of Paris about climate change. Okay. I'm very concerned about the world trade for the moment, and certainly also the danger of a war about war on trade. Certainly, when you look to the President of the United States, also vis-à-vis Europe, and certainly vis-à-vis China. That's global impression. Secondly, the relationship between Europe and Russia, and there were some sanctions and counter-sanctions. And the reason is that there was a Minsk agreements, and that there is no big evolution to solve that problem. And I hope that in the future we can, by dialogue, going in the right direction. But the impact of these sanctions and counter-sanctions, certainly for Belgium, and you mentioned it already, is certainly in the field of agriculture. I was a long time ago also Minister of Agriculture. And I was also here several times at that time when there were no sanctions to discuss some very important issues. And for Belgian Flanders, the most important impact of the sanctions and counter-sanctions are in agriculture and in specific area of pears. We imported a lot of pears in Russia. At a certain moment when you go to a restaurant and you order a menu with a recipe with pears, I can assure you these pears were coming from Belgium, Flanders. Now I'm not sure anymore. Or you don't eat pears anymore, or they are coming from another country. I shall have some very interesting meetings also with ministers to see what the situation is now. But the most important impact for Belgium is in the sector of agriculture. And I hope that, of course, the European Union stick together to say, okay, we have decided for these sanctions, and we have see that you have taken counter-sanctions, okay, it's part of the game. But that the European Union, first of all, said, okay, we shall further go in dialogue and to see what we can do to have another situation and no sanctions in the future. That's, for the moment, not the case. Secondly, we shall try also bilateral Belgium-Russia to see what we can do with respect of the sanctions, of course, because we are in the European Union, and Belgium is a very solid partner in the European Union. We are not playing alone to say, okay, European Union, we have some sanctions, but we are from Belgium. We don't care about the sanctions. That is good for Germany and other countries, but not for us. That's not the case. We hope that also bilateral contacts, we can step by step strengthening our relations, and also in behalf of the companies and the sectors and so on, find some solutions in other areas where there are no sanctions for the moment. Okay, next question. You decide.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. My question is concerning the issue of Crimea and EU-Russian relations. Whether it is possible to, first of all, are there any talks in EU going concerning the Crimea issue? And is it in theory possible that the new borders will be accepted? Thank you.
The new borders will be accepted in which case? I can be very short. The answer is no. 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 No is no. But that is our position for the moment. Other question?
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for coming to St. Petersburg. So I have a question concerning the UK and European Union. So you have said that a lot of exportation and stuff actually going to UK. So I know that, okay, let's imagine that today UK decided to go out from European Union 100%. So I know that technically by the I don't know, the law and the system of the European Union and the way of implementation, it's quite hard practically to actually stop exporting and importing. I think that actually UK gained the benefit from this 100%. So first, if he's out from the European Union, he have the right to decide to not, for example, to accept immigrations or a lot of bargains after that, because there's no cooperation with the European Union anymore in the way that, oh, we accept international law, we accept this from UN and stuff. Now, UK is so independent. So my question is that, in case that UK is going out, I'm not talking just about Belgium country, I'm talking also the rest of the country in European Union, about the economics. Because UK is quite the center of the European Union too, to be honest. Every exportation and stuff is going past by UK a lot and a lot. So I think that what is the position of European Union or Belgium after UK decided to go out? That practically are you going to sanction for the economics for UK, or you are going to continue to import and export? Because I think that even European Union decide to not be anymore with UK, and UK decide not to be anymore with the European Union, but anyway, practically, you still have the relationship behind. So I think that the treaty is just going to be just the word. It's not going to be in the practice way. So what is the position of Belgium and European Union?
Okay, also a very interesting question. First of all, also a global answer. When you look to the world, and when you look to globalization and digitalization and so on, you need scale. You need scale. Otherwise, you are not a player around the table. When you have 500 million consumers in the European Union, where there is the same consumer law and so on, you have scale. When you have big companies, what is necessary to compete with other big companies, you need scale. That's economics. Scale is certainly now a positive element. Just to leave the European Union and to lower your scale, that is not very, my point of view, intelligent. Secondly, you have, of course, you'll be right when you say, okay, life is going on. When they leave the European Union, next day the sun will be there, the evening the moon, the companies will be there, and there will be trade, of course. That's true. Normalization in life is a very interesting concept, a very strong concept. Everything after a certain time is normalizing and is going more or less, or try to be more or less the same as yesterday. But when UK leave, and Trump is still in the UK, I said, okay, no problem, we shall have some very interesting trade agreements between UK and the United States and so on. Don't worry, I shall solve the problem for you, UK. When there is no agreement about the free trade agreement, then, like I said, we come in a situation, as European Union have also with other countries where there is no free trade agreement, in a situation where there will be automatically tariffs. And we asked the National Bank for Belgium to calculate what will be the impact in that kind of scenario, and the impact was, and you know Belgium is a small country, we shall lose more than 40,000 jobs. There will be a cost of 2.2 billion euros each year, because we must pay. There is, of course, also a benefit part of this story, because now we see that companies are coming from London to Brussels and to Frankfurt and to Paris. They leave UK. And a good example is Lloyd's has already decided to come to Brussels. Insurance company is coming to Brussels, because they have, of course, also the knowledge that they must be where the market is. And the market of 500 consumers is in the European Union. The market of the UK is a very small country, it's a very small market. And my big concern is that we will pay the bill. I think not Europe, fine, European Union, but the people living in UK shall see that the life standard after leaving the European Union will be lower. They shall not have the same standard than they have for the moment. And of course, they can decide everything by themselves. But I mentioned already migration. You cannot solve migration only with one country. You must solve migration at the highest possible level, the United Nations. You must find solutions, because in Africa, 10 million or more people are suffering not only from climate change, but are also suffering because they have nothing to eat. And these people are in Africa, now for the moment, thinking, where shall I go to? And you can build walls, of course, you can try that, but you cannot say to 10 million people, stay there. That's the reason why the European Union launched a Marshall Plan, to say, okay, we will invest in Africa. We will try to make your life better in Africa. Stay there in Africa, because we need in Africa people that have the knowledge, that have the power, that have the engagement to make this situation better. And that's also a very difficult question, because that means we must put a lot of billion euros in that plan. We must invest, for example, in Africa. And for investing, we must say to the people in Europe, oh, your life standard is very high, but you must also be aware that we must give some money to Africa to make life better, because otherwise they're coming and your life standard will be in danger. And that are very difficult questions, you know, and very difficult discussions when you look to elections, when you look to political discussions, to say that. And to convince people, do not vote for the populist parties, but to vote for parties that are aware of the problems and trying to solve them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want to veer the conversation towards NATO and NATO enlargement. I mean, how do you... I know it's easy to justify a growing military alliance in terms of, you know, a sovereign decision to join, which is completely valid in each state. But how do you take? I mean, do you take at all into account the state raison d'etat of Russia? Do you take into account Russia's interests? I come from Mexico, and I can only think about a military alliance growing and growing and growing and growing during 5 decades against the United States. And where would that leave us? It would be very difficult for our country as it is now, for example, in the Ukraine. By the way, Zelensky today was with the NATO Secretary General. So, I mean, Russia is seeing a military alliance, abstracting a bit. Russia, beyond Russian aggression and all of this discourse and actions on the ground, Russia is seeing a military alliance growing each year against it. And it needs, I mean, what's the justification? How can you not take that into account at some point? Until when? Until where is that going to stop? I studied international relations, so for me it's like a growing military alliance is not a very good thing, you know.
Also a very good question. Let me start also a global view. After the Second World War, we organized the United Nations, and for the moment Belgium is member of the Security Council, a very important body to help to avoid conflicts, and when there is a conflict to discuss with Russia is one of the members of the Security Council, to discuss how to solve that kind of conflicts. I think that is very important. When there is a conflict, that there is a discussion at the United Nations level to discuss that and to have a solution around the table. That's not easy, but it's the only way to manage conflicts, certainly when it is military conflicts. That's my first important element, to be aware that we have already an institution, an organization where we have a platform where we can discuss that. And when there is a decision to intervene, military, then you can do that. When there is no decision, you must be very careful. Secondly, Europe is a member of the NATO, and the NATO is also a very important alliance. But my point is that we must, as European Union, not only be a soft power, but also a hard power. When there are some conflicts, it is easy, but it's not obvious to ask the Americans to solve the problems. And we have had Yugoslavia and so on. We had some problems. And then we ask the Americans to, hey, please solve that problem. That means that we must also have, at the European level, step by step, a European defense. And that's also a discussion. It's not easy to have European defense because we have a lot of armies in a lot of member states, the French, the Dutch, and you name it, also Belgium, of course. But step by step to go to a European defense. And what is so important to have this European defense strategy and to have also, at a certain moment in the future, European army to solve and to have discussions where we say, as European Union, okay, we shall also take initiatives. At the VN, United Nations level, of course, but that the NATO is not only an organization where the United States decide what is going on, but to have more balance in this military alliance. And I know, because I was not so long ago also in Mexico, I've met the new president, there are a lot of discussions going on, and to also invest in military organizations. But for me, you must be not naive in the world. You need, at a certain moment, an army. When there is a conflict, you must say, okay, stop that violence, because otherwise we will intervene. We must protect our people and also people outside of Europe, and there you need an army for. Not to go to war, but to protect people and to end conflicts. But we must be reasonable, because we have a lot of other problems. I mentioned several times the climate change problem is immense. When we are trying to create jobs, but you cannot create jobs when the planet is dying. When the planet is dead, you have no possibility to create jobs. And not only in Africa, but also in the European Union, we have now the consequences of the climate change. And that's a lot of money that must be invested in tackling this issue, for example. I hope that we find a balance between soft Europe, hard Europe, at the level of the NATO, to be sure that there is a balance, and certainly at the level of the United Nations to say very clear, when there is a problem, we must discuss that around the table in the Security Council. That's a place to discuss and to decide. And that was a very clear vision after the Second World War. We must not leave that kind of vision for the future of the next and the next generations. Okay.
So thank you so much for your explanation. I'm also from Belgium, and I choose to study here in Russia because I think Russia has a great future, and I want to be this kind of bridge between Europe and Russia. So I had like a really big shock, because I also had to vote myself a few weeks ago, and I was lost between the parties, like which one to choose. I'm lost because I'm really interested, no, you understand? And so I did this quiz to understand which one I should vote for, following between, you understand, like with your answer will guide you in your choice. And had this question who like led me without any words because I felt so shocked. Had this question: should we take more sanctions against Russia? So I felt like kind of disgusting because I think that already Russia now had have so many sanctions from Europe, or I think she's trying to make so many efforts. So my question is, because like Belgium is the center of Europe, like knowing the situation, how Europe and Russia are now, like what do you think is the future between Russia and Europe? Because I think like some part makes me feel that gonna have like a big relation because Russia is really strong and Europe is strong too. So if they are together, it can be something really amazing. But also when I have questions like this, that political parties want to be against Russia, what do you think will be then the future between Europe and Russia?
Okay, it's allowed. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Bev, excuse me. First of all, congratulations that you study here in St. Petersburg from Belgium. It's very good, and I hope that you succeed very soon and come back to Belgium or stay here. To be very frankly, I'm not in favor of more sanctions between Russia and Europe. Like I said, I'm in favor of a dialogue to find solutions around the table as soon as possible, but that means that the two sides must do something, and I mentioned already the Minsk agreements, that when you make this agreement, Minsk agreement, in practical and realize that, then the discussion can be very positive. But I'm not in favor of more sanctions. I'm in favor of dialogue. I'm in favor of finding a solution as soon as possible, with respect, of course, of very important principles. The Mexican student, I don't know his name, of course, mentioned sovereignty. It's a very interesting concept, sovereignty. You know that sovereignty was a new concept after a long time ago, the Peace of Westphalen. That was in 1643. After the 30 years war and the 80 years war, they invented a new concept, sovereignty. You may do in your country what you think that must be done. It is not God of the Pope and so on. The sovereignty at the level of the states. That was invented at that time. And this concept was a big problem because this concept was the reason why we have a Second World War, and also a First World War, and also certainly a First World War, and also a Second World War. And that's the reason why very important international organizations were organized. I mentioned the United Nations, of course, but you have also WTO, you have the International Labour Organization, to say sovereignty is okay, but at a certain level you must give some, not giving, but to say we shall participate at a higher level, and we have there some discussions and decisions that have an impact on our sovereignty, and we will accept that. When United Nations decide, we will accept that as Belgium. We will accept it as European Union when there is a decision at a higher level, because our sovereignty is not absolute. And that is, of course, when you go to other countries and so on, and there is no respect of sovereignty, then you have a problem. And when you have a problem, the sovereignty, then you can only solve that problem at a higher level, United Nations and so on. And that's, I think, more or less the case in general with Russia and Europe. But more sanctions, my big problem with sanctions is, who is the victim when you introduce sanctions? The victim is that you want to eat a pear from Flanders. And with the sanctions, it is not possible anymore. And they are of excellent quality and price also. This, the victim is the people, not the government, not the ministers, but you, people. And that's the reason why you must be very, very intelligent, of course, when you kind of sanctions, counter-sanctions, escalation of sanctions. Dus I hope that you have not voted for that party that, okay. Okay. Problem solved for the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent years, we have seen a rise of nationalism ideas and then Eurosceptics and populist powers, populist parties coming to power. And my first question is, how do you think it's going to affect European Union and this idea of European integration? And my second question, is there a big demand for this among the people of Europe? Among the people of Europe, is there a big demand for these ideas, for like nationalism and...
Okay, I mentioned that we have had elections the 26th of May, and there was a great fear that populist parties will win the elections all over Europe. To say, okay, we don't need the European Union anymore. We're going in the way like United Kingdom. We are for Europe. Geographically, it's very beautiful. But European Union, the results, luckily for us, are that a lot of other parties, socialist parties, green parties, and so on, have won the elections, and that there was not a big success of the populist parties all over Europe. First fact, they don't won the elections. In certain countries, there was, of course, a rise of populist parties, but not at this scale that there is now a big concern about the European Union. And that's a good thing, I think. Secondly, like I said already, we have some problems in Europe, European Union. People are not aware of the added value of the European Union, or not enough convinced that the European Union is a very important project for them. Certainly the older people are convinced that in Europe we have now peace for 70 years. But young people like you, when also in Belgium, say, okay, European Union bring peace. They say, peace. I don't know war in Europe. There's no danger for a war. When you say European Union is necessary to keep peace in Europe, I don't understand that. We must convince young people with other arguments than the very important argument, peace. We must say to younger people, you know, there is a project called Erasmus. You can study as a student, like you, 1 or 2 years, paid by the European Union, all over Europe. You can say, okay, I study now in Antwerp, but my 3rd or 5th year, I shall study in another university or high school in Europe. Paris, very popular for the moment. Lisbon, but you name it, you can study there. That's very important for young people. But there are some other issues. We have the ambition to be at the front when you talk about artificial intelligence. That Europe have the brains, Europe have the money, Europe have the power and the drive to say we will we will be at the front for the future when you speak about artificial intelligence. Or another issue, we will be at the front when you talk about electric batteries. And there is 40 days ago, or 3 weeks ago, European Battery Alliance. Because the situation is that 3% of all the batteries are produced in Europe and 80% in Asia. And then when you look to the evolution that 5 years from now, 10 years, everyone shall drive with an electric car, you need batteries. That when you have not a possibility to be at the front to have the best batteries in the world, then you have a problem. Therefore, there is now an alliance between different European Union countries, with different companies, Umicore, Solvay, and so on, to be at the front. And I hope that with this very ambitious projects that we can say to young people, that is why the European Union have added value. And when you are afraid of some new evolutions, we shall protect not only the social welfare, but we shall also attack social dumping. We shall introduce minimum salaries. We shall make it sure that when you have the age of 65, or that your pension will be there. And that is why I hope that the next years we can strengthen the European Union, but not only, and that I hope that you understand very well, that the European Union is not only discussion inside, but the European Union must be also go outside. For example, to Russia, to speak with Russian people and to make clear that European Union can only be a success when we have also added value outside the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you very much again for your broad overview of very sensitive issues which are addressing now European Union and also our country. And you are always welcome to our university, and I hope that education and higher education specifically is a very broad field to strengthening our cooperation. Yeah, and we are very open to cooperate in different levels. We already have a very tough connection to many universities in Belgium, like Free University of Brussels, and especially Solvay Business School, our specific partner in business education. Thank you again for your openness to answer all questions we will have.
Thank you.
We had today. Thank you.